Welcome to TheatreCast. You've reached episode number 86, being recorded June 16th, 2016. This is a show where theater teachers and professionals share their passions for theater trends, share practical advice and tips, and ask questions of theater's most innovative collaborators. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nick Cusimano, and joining me in person is my partner in crime and co-host,
Danielle, hello, from not Ohio. We're in the same screen.
It only happens like once or twice a year, so buckle in and we'll have some fun. Joining us today is Mr. Jeff Heil, and we met him last year at the Illinois Summit. And Jeffrey has his path to the education field, as we learned in his keynote that Danielle and I watched yesterday, was a very interesting route, and has some things that really tie into the theater world, such as empathy, student voice, and student agency. So we're just going to take some time and chat with Jeffrey today and share some of his wisdom with the TheatreCast audience.
And I've actually known this man for 4 years. 4 years. We met when we were becoming newly minted Google certified innovators, although back then...
Certified teachers, Mountain View, 2012.
Wow.
The best crew
ever
in the history of Google Teacher.
It's so good they changed the name.
And now we're starting a cohort war, but I'll just be quiet here.
Team Timeline represents.
Yeah, we were even on the same team, and we had T-shirts.
Yeah, we had T-shirts.
But
did you have a T-shirt, Nick?
No.
Just for your just
we also had stickers.
Right.
That's why I wasn't going to argue that MTV 12 was the best.
Yeah. But you went the furthest, so.
Yeah.
To Sydney.
Sydney 13. Yeah, so.
So we're really lucky to have Jeff here today, also in the same space, California boy that he is. And as Nick said, he's got an alt path to teaching, as do I, in fact. But would you tell our listeners a brief sort of thumbnail of how you got into teaching?
Well, interestingly enough, I actually graduated from high school. I come from a long line of sort of uneducated family members. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. Neither did my sister, and I have a niece and a nephew who haven't. So education was never like a big deal in our family. So out of high school, I joined the Air Force because that's what I thought I should do. So I joined the Air Force, but I picked a career path that was Aerospace Physiology Specialist. So everything in the Air Force is like a specialist because you might say painter, but the United States Air Force would say, no, sir, you are a protective coating specialist. You might see, a pencil as, just a pencil, but no, to the U.S. Air Force, it is a portable, handheld, personal communication device.
It costs $500.
With a delete feature. That would be the eraser. So I spent 4 years in the Air Force, and they sent me to Denver for 2 months to learn how to become an instructor, and I spent the better part of 4 years teaching classes, nothing too exciting, on auction equipment and on night vision and things like that, and working with the altitude chamber. So I got out of the Air Force and I went back to Arizona, and I worked in the hotel business for a long time. And I moved to San Diego in 1988, sadly. I wish it was, that'd make me 10 years younger. 1988, and I worked for the Hyatt, and it was then with a conversation that I had with my mom about my frustrations over my nephew, like, why is it okay with you that Jeremy drops out of school? And my mom's answer was, we just ain't school people. And that's part, there were other circumstances, but that was a huge catalyst for me to say, all right, it's time to do something about this. And so I went to college. I really didn't know that I was going to teach necessarily, but I knew that I wanted to be educated. So graduated with a degree in philosophy, which, having been a bartender made me a professional bartender with a degree in philosophy, and I still didn't.
As a theater teacher, as a theater graduate, I had a degree in waitressing.
See,
so
there you go. Exactly.
Similar paths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that my wife and I lived downtown San Diego, and there was a shelter across the street, and we didn't know it was a shelter. We would just see these kids mulling about. And one day I got up the courage to walk over there, and I said, "Hey, what's going on here? Why are you locking these poor kids in the building?" And the security guard looked at me and he laughed and he said, "No, this is a homeless shelter, and I'm the security guard." And that's when I knew. I mean, right then and there, I was like, "Okay, what do I have to do to work here?" And I sought out the principal, and crazy circumstances happened. There were only 2 teachers there. They'd only ever had 2 teachers, and one of the teachers left probably 2 weeks after I had that conversation. And so I was able to go there. And so I think that part of talking about the belief in empathy and voice, choice, and agency, I don't even know that I used those sort of words when I worked with that population, but as we grow and learn, that's all we knew how to do, was to love those kids and to try to create opportunities for them to learn in sort of non-traditional ways. One of the coolest things that we did was we were given a chunk of money that was part of what was called the Honda Bill, that became later known as community day schools. And you were essentially asked to extend your school day by 60 minutes. And in so doing, you were in this position to get some funding. And so we were given the money, my partner Mel and I, and we essentially spent all of it on bringing cool things in for the kids to do. We took out all of these ugly ceiling tiles and repainted them. I mean, many of my students recreated famous pieces of art. And so we painted all the ceiling tiles. We brought in a capoeira teacher. We brought in a yoga teacher. We brought in a San Diego Junior Theater. We just did everything we could to try to give these kids experiences, a lot of filmmaking. If you get to see me do a keynote, you'll get to see some of the films they made. But essentially that's how we were able to reach those kids. And it was funny because then I left there in 2005 to go to Cal State San Marcos as a distinguished teacher in residence. And subsequent to that, I'm now starting to understand, as now voice, choice, and agency becomes a more popular way to talk about doing what we did. Like, I didn't know what we were doing at the time was mastery-based learning. I didn't know what we were doing was really giving them, I didn't use words like voice, choice, and agency. But as I look back on those experiences, so I've spent the better part of 20 years working either directly with kids or since 2005 with teachers or credentials students to try to get them to rethink the way that they should be doing education, and really pushing them and trying to stretch them in ways that would let them see the value of fostering voice, choice, and agency. And all of that, though, to me, is meaningless if we don't establish relationships with kids. And I think that's the sort of that empathy part. If you cannot put yourself in the position of learner, first of all, to know what that, and I think that is what is so awesome about the theater community, is you are perpetually a learner. No matter how skilled you are, you take on a new role, you're learning something new. You take on a new project, you're doing something new. And I think that is what is so amazing about theater, and even about any of the what would be used to be, they called them the ROP courses, now they're CTE, career technical. Anything that's like that hands-on, this perpetual learning experience. And traditional education had gone so far away from that, that I think the teachers became sort of victims of that movement and sort of stopped being learners. And when you stop being a learner, you move further away from that space that you need to be in to truly have empathy for the kids in your class. And I think you need to have that empathy for them as learners, but also first and foremost as kids.
You when I'm looking at the kinds of activities you did, namely I'm thinking of the film, I think there was a sort of assumption when we were growing up and when we first started teaching, probably, that learner meant a consumer of information. Like you sit and baby bird, and I put the food in your beak, and you go fly away and be a bird. And what you've done is giving the students those video cameras. That learning isn't a passive experience the way that you've designed it in your classrooms. That learning is a doing experience, and we can relate to that as theater artists and theater teachers too, that you can't sit and read about a play. You have to get up and do it. It's a blueprint for action as opposed to asking you to just sit, look at it, download it into your brain, and walk away.
And ironically, you really can't and never have been able to do that.
Right.
Yeah, we've been doing that for such a long time that it's sort of defined what education
sounds
is.
on paper real efficient.
Yeah, it sure does.
And I just Keanu Reeves in Matrix. I know Kung Fu. But no, you know Kung Fu by getting. I do. I'm not.
And Nick doesn't, but he did stay at a Holiday Inn last night.
Yeah. So what made you pick, because I know you in your keynote, which I've heard a few times, but it's grown, so I've enjoyed it every time. You picked sort of on a gut reaction, it sounds like technology and specifically film seems like it was a really big part of what you did. So what do you think, looking back, because it might not have been conscious, like you said, made you pick that?
And as I had mentioned in the keynote, we had this opportunity that the principal came to Melanie and I, and he said, obviously with homeless youth, we were eligible for Title I funding, and he said, we're going to give you a chunk of Title I money, and you all can spend it however you want. And so we were given $10,000, and that was like 1996, maybe 1997, and we weren't really sure what to do with it, but I knew somewhere that the marriage between technology and school was going to, the potential of what that could do and could revolutionize the way that kids could learn. And I still don't even think I really could articulate it even then. But so we've got 5 laptops at the time. The first MacBook laptops, the iBooks, big clams, and Bondi Blue and
cool.
Mandarin, I think was the other color.
Colors.
And I can't even remember what drove me to the film, but it was moving towards, we were initially called Teen Quest, which was part of Father Joe Villages. And then we got a new building that was called the Toussaint Teen Center, named after a slave named Pierre Toussaint, who was a hairdresser, but actually ended up, doing everything he could to help people around him. So anyway, we had a statue of Pierre Toussaint. So we wanted to change our name because of what we were doing to the Toussaint Academy of Arts and Sciences. And we really wanted to focus on that creative side of the kids, because that's what we saw was really bringing out, and these are kids that were at risk, they were in risk, and I think now they call it, trauma-informed education, because these kids were in trauma, and art was the vehicle that got them out of that. And so I don't even know which came first. Was it the painting? Was it the dancing? Was it? But when we were able to get the video cameras, and then had these kids start just making videos, and that started to transform the way that they thought of themselves and who they were in relation to the normal kids. They would always, get mad, and they would say, "I want to go to a normal school." And we would look at it, and I would say,
"Really?"
I said, "Is this school abnormal? What did someone not tell me I'm teaching in an abnormal high school?" But it was just sort of giving them the ability to. And I had always, from the first day that I taught, believed in choice. So we would always give options over how kids could meet the expectations. And so video just sort of became one of those options. And then it became one of the things that was an option for the after-school program that we did. So that was, you could do sports, you could do theater, you could do whatever it was. They had choices. And so film became one of them.
they could capture all of those.
Yeah, and they just took it and ran with it, and it was amazing. I mean, that up until I left, that was still something. And then Father Joe someone had donated a house out in the middle of the desert, but it was a massive house with land and horses. And for the last 2 years I was there, we spent 3 weeks in the summer out there doing a week of film camp. That we call it film camp, whatever it was. But we would just go out there and we made movies and did goofy things. And they rode horses and shot bows and archery and all kinds of things. And then we would have again, we had such a great partnership with the Teen Center that we would have, Father Joe loved to showcase the amazing things these kids would do. So we would have huge events where, I remember they made, I didn't do it, they made these amazing masks, these paper mache masks. And so we would showcase the films we made, they would come in and see the art, and we did photography. That was another thing. I didn't know any better, and I had an old room that I bought. I had a woman that was willing to teach photography, so I went and begged a camera company to give me some SLRs. So they gave me 8 SLRs, and we set up and I got the processing machine. I don't even know what the hell it's called, but we developed our own film. So the kids learned how to develop their own. You know what I mean? It was just became part of the culture of film. And I think that really helped strengthen the relationships that we have. But more than anything, I think it showed those kids that we valued them. We were willing
Somebody
to commit.
sees you.
Yeah, and we were willing to commit the time and the energy and the human power that it took, to let them essentially do whatever they wanted to do.
This is an impossible question to answer, so I'm going to ask it of you. It's impossible because it's far too general, and I know everybody's got different circumstances. But if I was a teacher because I think a lot of teachers are raising their hands in prayer hands right now and saying hallelujah to the idea of voice, choice, and agency, and the idea of bucking that old system of just passive learning, but maybe don't have a sense of how to begin. So if I was a teacher who felt that urge to do that, and I wanted to put cameras or film in the tool belt of my students, and I think nowadays, in a way, it's easier.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah, to get the tools. I wouldn't have to go find somebody who's willing to give me cameras. But what steps would you recommend a teacher take to begin giving students voice, choice, and agency through film or through art or through photography or storytelling?
I think it's finding the resources. I mean, do we have the financial resources? Because often schools have Apple budgets and they never spend that money, or that money gets absorbed by somebody else. So find out, is there money? How is it being spent? Because often it's being misspent, sadly, and I think you all know that.
Yes.
And so is there a way that I can, and if the school doesn't have the money or the resources, then go to the community. And it doesn't matter what, you don't have to go to the community with a group of homeless students for the community to give back. There's Donors Choose, there's all kinds of opportunities, I think. One of the, I wrote, and this was so long ago, Adobe had a program called Gifts in Kind. And so I wrote to Adobe and requested that they give us some software, and they sent us free software. So I think it's just getting out I don't think it's the resources that are the big problem. I think you'll get them, or depending on the background of the kids, they may even have cameras. You know what I mean? It's exhaust everything you can to get the stuff. It's more about seeing the value. You have to see the value in doing this for kids, because the value exceeds whatever project you have them working. Value will follow them, throughout life. And so it's not, could you do it? It's when will you do it? I think that should be, you know what I mean? And you can, it's about changing the way that your mindset is changing the way that you think about learning. And as we just said, I mean, we know that passive learning isn't really even learning. And so there's no better way to do that than through the theater arts, through the practical arts. Anything that we can get these kids using their hands, using their brains, problem solving. It can be, now it's coding. I mean, if you've got Chromebooks in your class, that's making, that's play, that's rethinking the way in which
that makes me just think about the extension that I broke today. But okay, yeah, I can't get to work.
She did break.
I always do, but that's okay because I can try again. And in a world where, as a teacher, I have to turn in grades at the end of the quarter, semester, but I want to give my students that sense of time and the ability to fail and make mistakes. What would your advice be to somebody who's starting out with their students and has that sort of push-pull, that dichotomy?
I think that's a question that comes up a lot when we have these conversations. I think that you, again, it's about rethinking. Don't just have these kids write a play. They have them reflect on the process of writing a play. You know what I mean? And so that's so easy to do. I mean, because then that gets them to start thinking about their learning. And so the medium is unimportant to me. Like when I have kids do 20% projects, the medium's unimportant because they're researching, they're writing, they're reflecting, they are giving peer feedback, and those are the skills that you need to be successful. And they can apply to anything. And often, people say, well, a 20% project or any project that gives voice, choice, and agency, I'm a math teacher, I can't do that. I'm like, you absolutely can do that. Because sometimes kids are even more creative with boundaries. And so if you just set the boundaries and say, this is your boundary, maybe this is your boundary in English, but this is your boundary, you have this much space to create. How can you show me that you understand English? Can I go out and shoot a video of it? Could I go out and work out some way to find angles in nature and create problems based on authentic, geographical shape or geometrical shapes and geographical shapes?
Sure.
So I think it's just, thinking beyond, widening your aperture of what you think school is, and also focusing on a deep understanding. So we do too much breadth and not enough depth, and so this lends itself to a deeper understanding. And it's more than it's more than just writing a play. Like, you're showing a deep understanding of the Flint water crisis through a play. You know what I'm saying? And so it doesn't. It's that through piece that the arts, the technology can lend itself. We can't give up though on the X, that which we're shooting at. So that's I'm showing molecular whatever, I can't even say biology, but whatever it would be. I'm showing you that I understand this through film, through acting, through photography. You know what I mean? And being able to explain it in such a way to someone else that shows you understand.
That's what's so inspiring about the films, that your student films that you showed, and maybe we can put some links up in our show notes later of examples of some of what
I have some on my
Jeff
YouTube
kids
page.
have done.
Yeah.
So, but that they were clearly people who were voiceless, choiceless, and agentless at some times in their life, and that these
usually through no fault of their own.
No, just random happenstance or institutionalized bigotry, but that their film is this just genuine and authentic attempt to communicate and articulate, this is what it's like in my neck of the woods. And that the circumstances might be really different, but that everybody can relate to the universality of what they're saying. And that there's something so just fundamentally human that gets lost in the traditional setup of education that we forget that we're all doing this so that we can be better humans in some way.
And I think you touch on a really interesting point in your keynote is about relationships, because if you asked a group of teachers, who are the teachers that you remember? Who are the ones you connect with? Those ones who
gave you the best standardized tests ever.
and those are the ones you built those relationships with.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have to remember that we serve that role, and we need to remember to connect to that. And sometimes we just have to block out some of the other noise or state or national or testing. As I think we have to create creative problem solvers who go out on the world. Bubbling on a test is okay, so you can bubble on a test. What job do you do that out there in the world? And it feels like it feels like sometimes you're like, okay, so they can bubble on the test, but what job is there out there that's what they're going to do? But it's such a strong mentality that we're fighting against.
But I would say that the skills that Jeff taught those kids and is teaching teachers to teach those kids, and that we do too, I think. Though bubbling on a test isn't our end goal, that the creative problem solving of how do I make a problem about angles by looking at a tree, that the creative problem solving more often as passive learning would, create someone who can actually bubble on a test all right.
No, I mean,
that the skills that the bubbling is going to measure shouldn't be, that the bubble shouldn't be the goal. But if you trust in the process of deep learning, voice, choice, and agency, thinking with empathy, thinking outside the traditional box in your teaching, then I think those skills will or won't take care of themselves, but they're more likely to take care of themselves than if you're just teaching to the test.
I know we have those skills and can build that in our students. Sometimes it just gets a little bit disheartening because sometimes it seems the focus is so much preparing for the test, and outside of that, we're hopefully creating, well-rounded, problem-solving, make their way in the world human beings. That's a big job.
And understanding
understanding how they can navigate the world.
And their relationship to, what their place is in the global society.
Exactly. And we fixed it.
We
fixed education.
Just do that.
Just do that.
And I think something we as theater teachers, and I know I've said this before, is we may not be preparing them for the test, but I think sometimes we get busy preparing them for the performance. And we got to remember about the process, and we need to take time away from the process to help other teachers who this is a totally foreign thing to understand how to use it and how to help engage their students more. So just to take that moment and say, hey, in that 2 weeks where you don't have a show, you should do a workshop after school to help your other teachers. That type of help your teachers build those skill sets so that they can help their students.
So let's say I had some resources. I have cameras or phones for all my kids, and I'm maybe just a middle school teacher. Let's say social studies teacher, and I want to do something with all of that that gives them. Where do I begin? What do I do as a teacher? I've got the want, I've got the things, I've got the kids, and then I think a lot of teachers feel like, yeah, I buy into the philosophy, I don't know what to do.
Well, I've worked it out for everybody in your audience that they can have access to YouTube for free.
I've heard of it. That's so nice of you. So nice of you.
Just search for, there are so many people that are already doing this and sharing it to a global audience. And so I think, and just ask the kids.
Yeah.
Because my daughters could find that for you probably quicker than I could. So I think it's just finding community. So whether that community is a face-to-face community or whether that's an online community, finding a community of others, you don't have to do this alone. You don't need to be the sole, researcher or the sole sage to impart this information, nor do I. I think it's about finding that same thing. You need to have the same amount of empathy for yourself and the things that you don't know, and to allow you to, have I think the humility to go out and say, I don't know, can someone help me? Or, what can we trade? But I've got three pieces of gum and one left shoe.
So I'll give you YouTube for that. That's good. I think it was you. We were trying to adopt a version of 20% projects at my school, and what we ran into were kids who'd say, I don't know what I want to do. And I felt like for them it was, what they were really saying is, I don't know what I could do that you would stamp as being acceptable for this project. And sometimes it was, I don't feel like working very hard on something with school because school equals boring. So I was struggling to find a way to sort of plug in that. I think everybody can be inspired. To plug in that inspiration, add that Chrome extension that gets them inspired. And one of the things you talked about, and you showed us, I think it was you, I'm attributing it to you, so accept that, was that you said research doesn't have to look like finding out what someone else had done and reporting on that it could be your own thing. And I think you showed a woman who wanted to learn to ride a bicycle.
Yes, that was me.
And she just recorded her attempts to do it in a blog. And it was fascinating. And to me, that was my aha moment, where I'm like, yeah, I want to learn how to get good at something, so I'm just going to find out how to do it.
A couple things. I think advice would be, we've beaten the creativity out of these kids. We've educated the creativity out of them. And not really actually beaten, except for Danielle.
Yes.
But, we've educated the creativity out of them. And we've also sort of, in many ways, tried to do the same with curiosity. And so when you choose to give them voice, choice, and agency, don't expect that they're going to thank you. You know what I mean? It's like, and many of them truly don't know or care. It's like, what do you mean you're asking me what I want to do? No one's ever asked me that. I'm 14.
Yeah.
I know this game. I've been at school since I was 5. No one's ever asked me that. The hell are you doing asking me to think? So you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared to not be thanked like you think you should be, because you are saving the world, but also be prepared. Be prepared to scaffold the projects for the kids. I had a friend who teaches in a residential home for hard-to-place foster youth, and so she was trying to do a 20% project over a semester, and the kids could not handle that sort of freedom at that time.
Yeah.
And what she did, I thought, was brilliant. Her hack was to, on Monday, they would brainstorm what they wanted to learn that week. And so they became a series of mini 20% projects that were doable and that could be completed. And she had a lot of success with that. So it's knowing your population, and it's knowing what scaffolds you would need, but be aware that you will need them. What scaffolds you would need. Where else could you get support? And examples, as many as you can show them, and let them know that the topic isn't as important as the demonstration of and reflection of the learning.
Learning how to dig in and go.
Absolutely.
And follow your passion, which I know is something Nick's talking a lot about lately, is finding your passion, no matter how small it is, whatever the little thing is you love to do, and go ride a bike. But it doesn't have to be end-world hunger.
And whether adult or younger, documenting your learning through the process and using the tools we have access to, I think it's kind of fascinating what you can show and the learning and what that might spark to someone watching that and go, oh, I've never done that before. I really want to learn how to skydive. or whatever it may be, and what is that process, and by them learning that process and documenting it in whatever way ignites, thrills them, and then you have the journey documented, which is so much stronger than give me a research report. I mean, not that doing research is something that
It's not
part of
research,
the,
though. That's a lit review. We need to stop calling it research. That's a lit review. It's reading what other people wrote about something. I think research is more what you guys are talking about. It's trying something that no one ever has measured before, or if they measured it, you want to measure it again and see if it really works the same way wherever you are. I think one of my colleagues, Hi Marguerite, is a brilliant young teacher. Man, she's so good. And she teaches a senior research class, and they went in thinking it was, we're going to read journal articles and report on them, and no, you're going to go do original research. And like you said, her year teaching it, she said it was so broad that they pretty much spent the whole year kind of calibrating in toward what it was they were really interested in. And this time she said she thinks she wants to take preliminary findings, research that's out there that they looked at preliminarily, and have them try doing that again at our school and see if it works. So there was one about smiling. If you smiled, how many people smiled back? And she said that's something they could do here and they'd be interested in. So that's another one you could go look at too. You don't have to be original. Moonshot thinking doesn't have to be a shot no one else has taken. You can take what they figured out and say, oh, I know what I could do to fix that. Or, oh, they did that, can I do it? And try that. There, we fixed it again. Fixed education. Oh, next.
what other resources would you recommend to teachers starting that process?
I think just reading, or finding podcasts.
That's a big one.
You know, find something that will inspire you. I have a list of books for learning that I recommend to people when they ask me these questions. But you know, I like Will Richardson's got a book called From Master Teacher to Master Learner, and it's very short and easy to digest, and I really like it. Getting people to think, you know, differently about what this could look like. And it's also finding, like I said, not only finding community, but finding your tribe, finding the people that are like you that will inspire you, not tell you it can't be done.
What are some? We were sitting around last night at the speakers' little get together we had, and comparing a bunch of us on our phones podcasts we listen to, because that inspired me a lot. I drive a lot, so now that my phone can talk to my car,
I'm a big audiobook guy too.
Love it. Yeah.
So
So what are some podcasts or audiobooks that you've liked?
I like Radiolab. I like Radiolab a lot. I like The Moth. I love those stories from The Moth. I'm a fantasy sports geek, so I listen to fantasy sports podcast. Probably not that interesting to anyone else, but
it is though. There's a lot going on there. That's research.
But I'm very. I live by a mountain, so I do a lot of not a mountain, whatever it's called a mountain. It's only about 1,500 feet, but I climb it a lot, and I love listening to audiobooks. You know, as I'm doing. So I'm currently listening to Tony Wagner's book. I don't know what the hell it's called.
We'll edit this out.
Something to Succeed. I don't even know what the name of it is. Most Likely to Succeed. And it is an awesome look. I mean, I read his book on the global achievement gap, and then he wrote a book on creating innovators. And so, and it played off. I also listened to How Google Works, and in How Google Works, they talked about needing these, you know, the creatives, you know. And Tony Wagner picked up on that and saying, how do we create these sort of smart creatives in schools? Because that's who Google looks for. So again, once you start getting into that, another one that I love is A New Culture of Learning. And they look at learning as not just a pursuit of knowledge, but an interplay of knowledge, making, and play.
Mm.
And that's what learning is. And so,
That's
I mean,
that's what.
and the idea that, and when you think about that concept of play, there's no failure in play. And so,
well, it's all failure,
yeah.
but that's part of it. That I think of Angry Birds. You spend most of your time in that game failing and dying, but you get unlimited lives, so you just keep going. You don't even have to put quarters in the machine anymore like they did back in our day.
wasn't my day.
We're the same
Yeah,
age.
we're the same age. I'm fascinated right now by the podcast Hidden Brain, too. That's another one I think in another life I was a behavioral economist. I certainly wasn't a speaker with a photographer. But that's another one I like. Serial was good. Embedded now is kind of a new Serial-esque in Freakonomics. But those are all good ones that get your The Moth 2 can get you sort of
Was there a sequel?
about things you want. Yeah, The Moth 2, The Return. It's in 3D.
There were so many unanswered questions from the moth.
StoryCorps, that's
And
really
on the theater, and I still love it to this day, is the Tobolowsky Files. That man is amazing. He will make you laugh. He will make you cry. He'll make you learn what it means to be a human being. And you will know him from, if you watch Groundhog's Day, he plays Ned Ryerson, who's the insurance salesman, and you will recognize his voice and his characters because he's in everything. Right now, he's in Silicon Valley.
Oh.
And was
the movie, not the play. I mean,
No,
the
the
series, not
the
the
show.
play.
He's the part owner, bald guy.
Wherever he is right now, if he just got
forget the
called the
agent.
bald guy, he's gone.
Jack. He just came into season 3.
Yeah.
He was in Californication.
Yes, he was in Californication, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, and
It's like
if you're
everybody's
Memento,
character
he's
actor.
is it Sammy Jenkins? I don't. One of the characters that's part of the plot where he loses his mind. Just
I'm sure it's
awesome.
written on a post-it somewhere.
So just on the theater end, I find that one really interesting. And he's got a movie called The Primary Instinct, and that was produced by him and David Chen, and also the thing that started the Tobolowsky Files, Stephen Tobolowsky's birthday party, which is a video, and he's just a master storyteller. And so if you get a chance, listen to all of them. They're amazing, and so that's my little plug.
Must listen to.
Yes, must listen to.
I had to go on a podcast sabbatical before this weekend because I knew I'd be in the car for 5.5 hour stints, and so couldn't listen. But it sounds like advice would be what you're saying is to kind of create for yourself as an educator an environment where you are inspired so that you can
Absolutely.
give that contagion to the wee ones and let them be inspired too. Yep.
Yeah. So if people wanted to find out who you are and follow you on Twitter, how would they do that?
They would look. I am J Heil, Heil 65 on all my social media. There's absolutely
Because he
no
was born
connection.
on June
There's
5th.
no
His birthday
connection
is June 5th. That's right.
to the 65 in the year that I was born. But you could search that on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, anything, and I would love to connect with people and share resources.
I love that Russian Hurley's, one of his is Russian
It
was taken.
That's his
And you don't think when we first started how important that handle
Yeah.
becomes.
But it does.
And then it really is. And so mine is at Ms. Filas, MSFILAS, on all the things. One-stop
On all the
cyber stalking. How about you, Big Nick?
And you can find me on Twitter at tthe4 theater spelled correctly, since we had Tim Tams this week the Australian way.
Yes.
Kim Sutton, who is one of the presenters, brought Tim Tams, and I love me some Tim Tams, and I miss them because you can only get them in Australia or affordably in Australia. You can order it through Amazon, but the arm and a leg in the States. And you follow me on Google Plus with Nick Cusimano. And you can just Google me, and you should be able to find me because I've knocked out all the other Nick Cusimanos with my views.
I knocked out the others as well. Yes, I now own my name.
Yeah, before I started using social media, there's a comic/DJ/restaurant owner and a guy who works in houses somewhere in New York.
There's someone who likes taking pictures of herself in bikinis a lot. That's not me. I love you all too much.
And we want to take a moment. Thank Jeff for joining us today. I really appreciate him sharing his knowledge with us all, and encourage you to check him out. And if you're able to make it to an EdTech Summit, do that, because you will learn so many different things, and there is a variety of things out there. It focuses not only on the left brain, but also the right brain type of stuff. Like, I'm going to the Wisconsin Summit, and Chris Betcher, he's doing one on using Chromebook to create rich media. So there's plenty of things out there. So be sure to check it out, and we'll see you soon on the next TheatreCast.